Hi, I'm Jen.
And I'm Carrie.
And we're the Recovery Gals.
We are two gals on a mission to shine the light of truth on those who might be struggling with addiction.
And offer the hope that recovery can give you.
We were able to sit down and talk with Ann Dowsett Johnston. She is the best-selling author and I believe a forerunner in women's recovery.
I totally agree.
She wrote the book, Drink, An Intimate Relationship Between Women and Alcohol. She is a psychotherapist and a registered social worker. We were so excited to have her and interview her. So grateful that she chose to be a guest on our podcast. Lots for you to learn. And here's more on the recovery revolution.
All right. Today on the podcast, we have Ann Dowsett Johnston. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you so much for having me, Recovery Gals.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you. Thanks for spending time with us.
We're so excited.
Yeah, it's terrific.
Yeah. So, Ann, I came across you. I was listening to a podcast and you happened to be the guest. And just a little background, I guess. When I was in treatment, I had told you this. When I was in treatment, there was they monitor the books that we read. And one of the books, which I don't get, after reading it, I'm like, this is ridiculous. But one of the books that we wanted to get through that we kind of wanted to pass around amongst each other was the book Drink. And all I knew was that it was a book that, how do I say this? Like maybe wasn't supposed to be floating around. And so then I wanted to read it more and we never got the approval for it. But I don't know. I think they just looked at the title and then they kept telling us, we need to get that, we need to look at it. We need to read through it a little bit and all this stuff. And then my friend got her copy back and it's like somebody had spilled an icy all over it. Like it was a brand new copy. We ordered it from Amazon and it's always a group thing, right? And so we ordered it from Amazon. We're all excited about it. She gets it back when she checked out and it has like a frozen icy, like cover. Anyway, it was devastating, but all that to say, so I came across you and I was running at the time. I was listening to the podcast and I found myself literally saying out loud, yes, like me too. Or like, oh my gosh, you just have such a way with words and such a way of describing addiction and just your wealth of knowledge. I know that you were able to interview several people before the publication of this book. Anyway, but in your book, you call alcohol the modern woman's steroid. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it enables us to do the heavy lifting of a complex world, and women's lives are complex. We, oversee childcare, we oversee big jobs, we oversee homes, we oversee often looking after other generations, elder relatives, and we haven't become happier over the years. Mm-hmm. There's evidence, and there's a study in my book that says since the 1970s, the work week has extended and men are happier and women are much unhappier. Mm-hmm. And I think what happened was the alcohol industry figured that women were underperforming and invented what I call pink the market, invented skinny girl cocktails, girls night out wine, mummy juice. Mm-hmm. And the very big messaging was if you want to relax, celebrate, or reward yourself, you turn to wine or vodka or whatever. And so it's the steroid that allows you to zip in from, a busy day at the office or a busy day homeschooling and pour yourself a glass of wine while you're chopping the vegetables. And it's common, all too common.
It's amazing because when I'm like just zoning out for a moment in my own busyness, sometimes I find myself looking through Instagram and it's amazing to see some of these not, and I'm not judging by any means, but some of these moms with these big wine glasses and just dumping the wine in and continuing to dump the wine while they're talking to their children. And it's like, okay, we need to slow this down a little bit. And it's almost like, and no one says anything about it because it's almost so normal that, and it's become normal. And yes, it's just,
You know,
Yes.
and I didn't even think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Mm-mm.
Well,
No.
I didn't even think anything of the marketing, like that they were actually marketing to women. Cause I think I just thought it was so common. This is just what we do. I never questioned it
Mhm.
until I read your book, because and then I got angry.
Good.
You're right. They little bottles. Like you said, there's like this whole culture around, you know, book clubs and mommy groups and all this stuff. So you had, and I'm just going to kind of go off of some of these notes, but you'd predicted that, women would close the gender gap in risky drinking. Can you elaborate on what we're seeing today?
Yeah, I mean, my book came out in 2013, and I think the sad truth is everything I predicted has come true. We see women outpacing men in terms of emergency room visits that relate to alcohol. We see men kind of flatlining in terms of risky drinking, and women steeply on the increase. We see the jokes, the birthday cards, the memes, as you were just saying, the fishbowl size glass of wine around children. And I don't see any corrective. I mean, I see some good things. The recovery movement has changed, but I don't see any major corrective about this is maybe questionable behavior, maybe questionable for children. We do see some very scary reporting on end-stage liver disease for women, young women in their 20s, happening out of America. And I think that it's scary, and it's not going in the right direction. Alcohol is cheap, it's readily available, and it is, the messaging is very powerful that this is how you should spend your private time.
right.
So, and I think it's a very tough message to talk about without sounding like a prohibitionist.
Yes.
Right.
You probably know that yourselves, without sounding like you're wagging a finger and you're in my case, I'm in my 60s, so I can sound like the wet blanket.
What?
All right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how much the pandemic is to blame for what has evolved with women?
I think you've seen two huge changes: homeschooling and this, what they call the she session, which is women dropping out of the workforce. And I think women reached capacity, office overload, total burnout. And it became apparent, all too apparent, that women with homeschooling were being broken, cracked. It was just too much. And so we saw a huge turning to alcohol. And the only good thing I would say beyond the recovery movement is there has been more media about the fact, media about drinking and drinking more. And so there's been more of a media dialogue, which didn't really exist before the pandemic. So maybe we're becoming more aware that this is actually urgent and something that we need to be dealing with.
Wow. I feel like there is a lot more talk about recovery, about mental health. I mean, people are speaking up about it. I personally had a hard time sharing my story publicly, just because of kind of the stigma, I felt like I was going to get labeled, or the shame that we just carry from our own personal stories. Do you have a personal story with alcohol, or kind of maybe what inspired you to write your book?
What inspired me to write the book was the fact that when I was a little girl, my mother was a very serious alcoholic, and she mixed day drinking with Valium, as many women did in the 1960s. She was a stay-at-home mom, a beautiful woman, very lonely, very depressed. And I was a terrible secret in our family. It wasn't a total secret, but it was treated like a secret. And when I fell down the same rabbit hole, my drinking looked completely different. I was vice principal of McGill University. I had had very powerful jobs in media, and I didn't drink during the day. In fact, I won awards at work. I didn't miss work, but I did drink at night, and I blackout drank near the end. So I didn't look like my mother. And so for a long time, I thought, well, I'm not an alcoholic because I don't drink like she does. Well, that just wasn't true. And I took myself to rehab in 2008, and I'm 12 years sober. But there is a very, I wanted to write this book as a means to, I turned to Carolyn Knapp's Drinking a Love Story, a beautiful book. When I was in trouble, long before I spoke to my best friend or my sister or anybody else, I turned to that book. I wanted my book to be the one that women turned to when they knew they had a problem, and wanted to normalize the fact that so many of us have trauma histories, have reasons to drink. We, tend to say, what's wrong with this woman, instead of what happened to her? What happened to her? What is she dealing with?
Right.
A more trauma-informed way of asking the question and taking a look at her life. And in my mother's case, it was, my father was always in another country. She was looking after three little girls, and three little children. Sorry, I have a brother as well. And it was a very lonely existence. Long pre-internet. We didn't use the long distance telephone the same way. And she was very isolated and depressed, and she drank. So I have a lot of compassion for my mother's story. I have a lot of compassion for her loneliness. I have a lot of compassion for why women drink. And I think a lot of the story is finding out why. Why are we doing it? Why was I numbing? And in my case, it was depression. And I was, just because of my mother's history with Valium, I was afraid to take an antidepressant. So, what are you trying to run away from? Women tend to isolate when they drink. They have a little ritual at home alone. I won't be seen, but I'll have my favorite wine or whatever it is you drink. And the question needs to be, what are you numbing?
And I love the fact that you said that you have compassion for your mother and for what she went through, because a lot of people, when they don't understand the disease of alcoholism, they go straight to judgment and finger pointing, when really truly the ultimate is asking, what happened to you? And that is so good that you pointed that out, because it's just, and that's where I think the shame comes into it, when people are judging you and pointing fingers, and it just makes it really difficult to get out of that cycle.
Totally. And I think that we tend to look at men who drink too much as a bon vivant, a big guy, he can handle his liquor, or he can't. But women are seen as sloppy. Women are really seen differently in our culture when we drink too much. And also, it's become a joke. It's become a joke. And you've all seen the bad birthday cards. And I have a onesie in my drawer right here. I won't pull it out, but basically it says, it's got a wine glass on it, and it says, I'm the reason mommy drinks, which is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And for it to be the size of a onesie.
Right.
I mean that, well, and that like, then we're getting into like lack of postpartum care and all of that stuff. But I mean, like what you just said, I mean, it's
right.
a onesie. So the child couldn't be any younger than the age of 1. So it's just amazing.
Right.
And that was my issue with alcohol was I had complex grief that came to a head that I didn't know about until after I had my first son. And then everything came crashing down. And the only way that I knew how to deal with it was to drink. And that was my survival. And so, yeah, I really
wow.
can resonate with that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken a lot of therapy and a lot of years to get to the root of that and to understand what the issues were. And, we're getting to a good place, but it's taken a lot of years and a lot of work to dig deep and to realize what the core issue was.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. My drinking, I feel like just started in college. And I thought I was just drinking normally, like a college student, until everybody graduated. And I kind of then kept it more in isolation because I knew that it wasn't great. My drinking pattern, an inability to stop, really. And so it's just interesting. I know that you had even talked about how there's this, with the marketing, there was kind of that invention of alcopop and how girls were starting so young. Do you have anything to add about that?
Well, I think it was a social experiment. The alcohol industry realized a whole gender was underperforming, and they aimed at young girls, knowing that young girls don't tend to like beer, and invented the alcopop, those sweet prepackaged drinks. And chick beer is what I call it, or cocktails with training wheels. And it went through the roof. Smirnoff saw huge profits. It was an experiment. It was enormously successful. And so by the time they get to college, young women aren't slowing down. They're playing drinking games with men. They typically don't eat the same as men. Men, will be drinking beer. They're drinking hard liquor. Men have had a meal before they went out. Women often save their calories for drinking. And it's not a pretty sight.
And the lower calorie alcohol too, that they've created.
Oh, it's
and marketed
everywhere. I mean, anymore.
Right.
It's just low cal everywhere. I mean, the keto diet. I mean, I was blaming the keto diet for that, but I'm sure it was all a big marketing scheme as well.
Right.
What I find interesting is you talked about alcopop. I think for a while it was, how these days it seems like it's like rosé all day.
Right.
And before it was like, that was a college girl's drink, or that was like the wimpy girl's drink. And just how marketing has played into promoting, certain things, even how that, like from when I was in college and we were drinking that, you had to graduate into more sophisticated drinking. Whereas now, even if we were to sell it now, it's a drug. I mean, alcohol is a drug. I don't know that selling it now, because technically it's ethanol, which
right.
is a neurotoxin,
right,
and carcinogen. I mean, I never put the carcinogen in your research. Did you find anything else about that?
No, but I think it's extremely healthy to, know that 15% of breast cancer cases are correlated to alcohol consumption, that there is a cancer connection, that there is a truth to the matter that we're democratically equal, but in North America, but metabolically and hormonally, we are not built the same when it comes to alcohol. And so, I just find we are almost willfully ignorant on these subjects as a population, because it's basically, who wants to hear bad news about your favorite legal drug? The story usually goes, I pay my taxes, I work hard, I'm a good parent. What I do on Friday night is my business.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so nobody wants to hear about the downside. And the truth is that the lobbying community for the alcohol business is enormous on Capitol Hill.
Right.
And so no politician necessarily wants to take this on. Why would they?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And like you said, it's just so readily available. I mean, I go to any grocery store and it seems to be on here in Iowa, we sell it. I find it interesting how it's sold differently. In fact, I think I probably knew I had a problem when I was in a different state and I couldn't get the alcohol I wanted because they had different laws than we have here.
I see.
It's just interesting because it was like, we need to find it. It was like I had it set in my mind. I need to find it. I need to get it. And I think it was a Sunday afternoon, and of course they were closed. And I was thinking, how in the world am I going to make it to Monday?
Oh my goodness.
How in the world? And
right.
And then it was like, but it's not in the grocery store. And here we have it in the grocery store. But in other states, it isn't sold in the grocery store. It's only sold certain areas. I just find that so interesting. Just the availability, especially the availability where we are, I would say.
Yeah, one example I can give is we have a gas station across the street, and where they normally put gum underneath the where they do the cashier, where they normally put gum, they have shooters.
No kidding.
Yes.
They're right by the register.
Shooters of alcohol, just readily available within vision of children. And it's just
that is incredible.
I mean, it's just the more that I'm learning, like I said, I kind of just bought into culturally, this is just what we do. This is how I relax. I mean, that is definitely the mindset. But to actually think about what I'm putting in my body, I mean, the way that I was destroying it and not even realizing it, obviously, until just recently, but just the amount of destruction. I mean, every morning I get up and I'm so grateful to my body. I thank my body for surviving and holding me up through that, because I can't imagine, just destroying something so over and over every day, and the fact that I'm blessed. I guess I didn't get in trouble with my liver. Which I'm very surprised at, because I have several friends that do. And I think when I finally got to the rooms of AA, it was like, this is death,
right.
That is a very possible outcome.
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of went. I'm
No,
here to
you're
hear.
good.
I want to learn more from Ann, and then I feel like I'm talking, and so I just need to.
It's okay. In your TEDx talk, which has more than 1.3 million views, you call yourself the poster girl of modern alcoholism. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I had big jobs. I had big responsibilities. I think the modern woman is, in terms of an alcoholic, is a highly functioning mother who is trying to have it all, or does have it all, and has realized that she has to do it all. To have it all, you have to do it all. And that you fold in alcohol as your helper, just like we used to call Valium Mother's Little Helper. It is Mother's Little Helper. It's a way to get through. I used it, to be utterly frank, I used it to go to sleep, to wake up, to, I'd be working hard and I have to go to a party. So a social lubricant to get me to unwind quickly. I just used alcohol near the end for just about everything. And it was my friend. It felt like my friend, my lover. Of course it wasn't.
Right.
But I call myself the poster girl, as my mother was the poster girl for her era, where she was using Valium and alcohol. I was functioning at a job and burning the candle at both ends and drinking too much.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had said something there. I apologize for the pause, but I was thinking about it, and then I was, like I was thinking maybe about my own journey of, I would have a drink and it was like all of a sudden vacuuming was very exciting. It was, so when you say the modern steroid, it was like all of a sudden unloading the dishes and, wiping behinds and all this stuff. I mean, it was just like for the first 5 minutes, maybe near the end, it was just like, and then it was just nothing. And it just robs you. I loved I think it was in the prologue of your book, where you talk about it is it a man in black?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
Can you describe it? Cause I'm feeling like I'm going to butcher it, but the way you described it was amazing to me.
I have alcohol showing up when we're very young, especially for certain people who will get into trouble. And he is always at the party first. And he's a very handsome man, whether he's in a tuxedo for you or a black leather jacket, he's a handsome man. And he helps you out for all your young adolescent parties and your college years. And he makes you feel like you can fit in and everything's great. And then as you age, you realize he's a loan shark and you borrow from him courage, anything you need, and he will one day ask for payback. And so in my case, in the prologue, I take the geographical cure thinking I can give up alcohol. I took the job in Montreal thinking I'll give up alcohol and it will all work out well. And of course it didn't. And then I realized he had moved in and I was a nightly drinker and I was a nightly beholden to him. And I asked him to leave. So I tried to quit and it didn't work out. And he wants everything. He wants my dining room table. He wants to live in my home. He wants my food. And I call it addiction. And that is the way I see addiction, where alcohol is a loan shark. He will lend you courage and you'll be funny at the party and you'll feel relaxed and you'll feel great at college. And then one day he'll come calling and ask for payback. And it's very informed by the myths of my childhood, the fairy tales of my childhood, where, there would be the magical individual who would promise to change everything, and then would come back a year later and ask for payback. And that's the way alcohol was for me. It asked for payback. And when it asked for payback, it was ugly. It was very ugly. I almost didn't get out alive. I was sure that had I kept drinking, I would have had a very not glamorous death, trip on some stairs or trip on a coffee table or whatever. And we probably all know people who've done that, died in a way that is really tragic, and who couldn't quit. And I think the biggest question I have, because my father died of it and my mother had 40 or 50 years, my biggest question is, why do some of us get it? Why are some of us blessed with recovery and some of us others just simply can't get it or won't get it? And I think that's the biggest conundrum.
Yeah, that is such a good question, because I have some very close friends that it seems like they'll get it for a month or they'll get it for 3 months, and then it's kind of the same cycle
Right.
over and over. And I think, oh, if you just, I want to have that magical piece or that magical phrase or I want to be able to give it to them. I want to flick the light on and show them that you have a fuller life out there for you,
Right.
and that's part of kind of the codependency part where it's like, I can't do it. It really
Right.
is kind of an individual thing. What would you say for you really was that moment where you were like, I'm not doing this anymore?
3 things happened. My cousin Doug, who was my favorite cousin growing up, was killed by a drunk driver in the spring of 2007. He was killed, and he was a father of 4, and he was killed on Father's Day, and it was immensely tragic. And I knew I was drinking too much. And I sat down on the floor of my condo that day and said, I lost my childhood to alcohol. I've lost Doug to alcohol. And now I'm losing myself to alcohol.
Mhm.
And that happened. And within a very short amount of time, my son confronted me, my sweetheart confronted me, and my best friend confronted me. And so, sooner rather than later, I went to rehab. And I had a hard time staying sober after rehab. So it took me about 6 months to get it right. And I think that's really common. I think, we have to almost reinvent our lives when we get sober and find out who we are, because we have been wasting time with alcohol. And so it was a journey to reinvent myself.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the identity piece is so crucial. I know for me, it was almost like this change in perspective of taking off all these labels that I had put on myself
Right.
and realizing, hold up, like I'm a good person and I deserve a good life. Like, what am I doing to myself? And who am I outside of this? Because it was like I took on all these, I'm a victim, I'm broken, and it's like none of these things are true. It's having that new perspective over basically your past, even, and going forward in the future, all while remaining in the day and in the moment. But the thing that I find so interesting, kind of in that process, and it is a journey. It's not an easy journey, but it is really liberating to learn more about yourself. I know that you have started writing recovery, writing a memoir, these seminars, I guess, for lack of a better word. You had written down, it's called Writing Your Recovery. And I loved that it was like writing down basically the memoir that you have, and maybe not just for addiction, but definitely that is a major theme. Tell us a little bit more about your new venture.
Yes. So I believe that we all have a story to tell. And I believe that if we can find the time to make sense of that story, we will be able to metabolize our journey and make sense of it. And so it's for women only. It's called Writing Your Recovery. And it's basically the writing course, having edited and written for 40 years, that I would like to take. And it takes your idea, and you meet people like Holly Whitaker and Laura McCown, and you workshop your ideas, and then ultimately you meet an agent, and all in a very active, intensive course with me. So up to 14 people. And we share our stories, workshop our stories over 8 weeks. And it is for people recovering from eating disorders or substance use or whatever it is that they are wrestling with. And they're very supportive communities, very, very supportive, active communities, and I love them.
Mhm. I love that too. I think I remember somebody saying, you get to write the end of your story. But I think a lot needs to be processed of the story up until now in order to like really write the best ending going forward. What part of storytelling do you think was healing for you?
I think that making sense of my lifeline, as I think it is for everybody. What are your character traits? What are your I was a very self-conscious kid growing up in Africa and very shy. And that same shyness sometimes turned to alcohol later. So I was connecting some dots. I think taking your narrative, your lifeline, and saying, what makes sense here? I mean, what makes sense in terms of the grief that I've gone through, or the loss I've gone through, or the disappointments I've gone through. And, Joan Didion, who just died, said, we tell ourselves stories in order to live, but it's a way to make sense of the history that you have.
Mhm.
And I think often we screech into sobriety and say, with a lot of shame, what happened to me? How could I have screwed up this badly? And my classes are a shame-free zone. They are a shame-free way of saying, this is what's rich about my story. This is what's interesting about my story. This is what defines my story. And women have a wonderful time.
Mhm. I just love, we live in story.
Mhm.
I personally think, and I find myself always saying, well, this is the narrative I'm telling myself. And, I think is that a Brene Brown thing? Maybe this is the story I'm telling myself. But I find that, as I've been thinking about writing and about your seminars and just different things, I just think there's such, one of the freeing things for me was taking agency, like just having ownership instead of just reacting to my life all the time, taking ownership of my life and having that basically agency, for lack of a better word, but having agency over my own life. It was just, I can see that could possibly be the case for women who are sharing what they've experienced, what they've been through, because it's very real for them.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very real for them. And I think everyone comes in scared, no matter how talented. I can't share my work. I won't be any good. And they emerge mutually supportive, really, sharing their emails and helping one another. And it's glorious to see what emerges. And then after that, a goodly portion of them go on to do writing your discovery, which is, I think I often have thought that we are in recovery, yes, but we get to discover ourselves without substance. And so we do writing your discovery. And it is a community that has been so exciting. It's only a year old and it's cross-pollinated with so much talent.
I love that. And just the fact that you're giving women a forum to be able to be vulnerable, and basically they're bearing their souls about their experiences. And that is not an easy thing for women to do. So I think it's amazing that you're giving them this platform to be able to just be honest with themselves and whoever else they'd like to be honest with. But it's just, I love that. I love it so much.
Thank you. Now we're having a good time.
Yes.
I love the connection, because I think we can't do it in isolation. We were masters at at isolating. And
oh, yes.
And the fact that you can connect with other people who have a very different story, but yet similar themes run through it.
Right.
It just is, there's nothing better than having that, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah, I think there's people are surprising themselves in terms of their own talent too, and finding different ways of. We start with what I call quilt squares, which doesn't scare people. I just take one scene, and that's it, and you work that up. And then you work up another scene and you don't worry too much about how they go together. And ultimately people get their confidence and weave together. Some have made books, some have made essays, some have entered contests. It's really exciting.
That's very cool. Is there anything else that you want to discuss, or anything else that kind of brimming in your head these days that you're...
One of the things that I think that isn't available to women in recovery, yes, there are wonderful podcasts like yours, but in terms of having a community where you could interact with writers that you care about, we're creating two of us are creating a, for lack of a better word, let's call it a book club, a speakers club. So we'll have some of the greatest quitlet writers, and it's called Sobriety Wise, and the talks are called Wise Talks, and it's for women only, and it's going to launch in April. And we, the other person being Javita Bodlowska, wrote Drunk Mom. The two of us are putting together this endeavor, and I'm really excited about it. It's going to be give you access to lots of terrific thinkers and writers, and a chance to ask them questions, and be a lot of fun.
You know what I love? As you were talking, I was just thinking of, you had said having, women only, and not that it's trying to be exclusive, but I will say, I remember going to AA meetings, and mine were mixed, that I had gone to. And, I had attended for a few years. AA ultimately wasn't really where I found my recovery, but certainly amazing foundational stuff there. But I had watched these men comment on the women, on their sobriety, on their relapse, and it was just like, is there something different about us women? I just remember one gentleman would always tell me, he would always kind of hypothesize why she just couldn't get it.
Oh, right.
And so it's like, women must deal with recovery in a different way, or that actually from that particular meeting, we would all go across the street to Whole Foods and we would kind of have a post-meeting meeting, and it was just these women. And, we would talk about, because if you're already talking about everything and, you're being honest, you can really talk about just about anything and it's not awkward.
Right.
We would have these great meetings, just women. And it left me longing for a place that I thought there should be, this is just I feel like this is very elementary, but I was thinking, is there not a big book written by a woman that, you know what I mean, that would just explain how emotionally and mentally I can get out of this? Because I feel like, I shouldn't say in 100%, but in general, I feel like men handle the emotional side of this much differently than women do.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And I have been very careful in my recovery to hang out with women, because I think that we speak differently when there aren't men in the room. And I think we function differently.
Yeah.
I'm part of something called Ola Sober, which is for women based out of Madrid, run by an Irish woman named Susan Christina. And it's terrific.
And what was it called again?
Ola Sober.
Ola Sober.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Awesome.
Lot of fun.
That's That's just great. See, here's the other thing. When I got sober, my options were rehab and AA.
Of course.
That's all I knew.
Me too.
And as I've kind of been delving into all these other areas, it's just amazing what's actually out there.
That's
what
true.
has come in maybe even just recent years, you know, with, I know you had mentioned Holly Whitaker and Laura McGowan, you know, there's you, all these podcasts that I've been finding.
Right.
There's just a lot of options out there, I guess.
Absolutely.
And I want to make that into a question for you. I'm hoping that Rick can edit this out, but
No.
Yeah, is there anything you want to say about, you know, the options and maybe where recovery's come
Right.
since your book?
We're in the middle of a recovery revolution, and there is a banquet table of options available to us now. From the very simple fact that you can go to AA anywhere in the world and go to women's groups and find them. Say you live in a small town and you don't want to go with the same people that you see all the time, you have options there, but there are so many options with the Luckiest Club and Ola Sober, and there are just so many options that didn't exist before, and it is a revolution.
Mhm.
People are recovering out loud, and that is not the way it was when 12 to 13 years ago I started getting sober.
Yeah.
People were hiding in church basements. They were feeling ashamed, and it was a very different time.
Mhm. Wow.
Yes, hiding in church basements. We
Yeah.
were, you know, you're always given that back room.
That is so
that's
true.
Just like hidden.
Yes.
Um,
I do have a quick question. Can you tell me, like, I know that you've mentioned that you're an adult child, and
Right.
so how has that impacted your journey?
Oh, what a great question. My journey is very affected by that. I think that when we are the adult child of an alcoholic, or in my case, two alcoholics, we've been through a lot of trauma.
Mhm.
I've lived through a lot of trauma, and it is incumbent upon me, in my opinion, to do a lot of therapy and deal with the ripple effects of what that means. And it goes back to that, you know, not what's wrong with that woman, but what happened to her,
Mhm.
and my sense of how I manage my life and how I manage the stressors of being an adult and the evolution of being an adult. I didn't cause it, but I do have responsibility to clean up my side of the street.
Right. Amen.
Mhm.
Amen. And do you have any codependent tendencies? I was just going to ask that because it, you know, normally, not saying normally, but, you know, being an adult child, that tends to kind of go hand in hand. So
are you an adult child?
I am.
Okay.
Mhm.
I just wanted to.
I lost my father from alcoholism in 2013, and I lost my mom actually a year ago tomorrow.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. That's very recent.
It is. So yes, my mother, I don't know if there was ever alcohol involved, but I do know that she was addicted to pain medication. And so, you know, yes. Anyway, not to downplay the grief that's happening there. But yes, so that's why I was going to ask, because I am terribly codependent, and I feel like a lot of that stems from being an adult child. So I have been working very diligently for the past 3 years in my codependency, and it's just amazing what working on that can do for a person. So I was just going to ask you, do you think you have any, I mean, I think everyone has codependent tendencies, but do you think that has been a part of your journey?
I'm sure it has. I'm sure it has. And I think that it's not a coincidence that when I went to choose my first husband, I chose the safest man I could find. And I think the ripple effects are huge, and how we make it conscious in our lives, how we have a responsibility to make our choices conscious. And I think that can be a lifelong effort.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, Anne, would you like to ask the?
Oh, I would love to. I'm sorry. I was just really thinking about codependency, and I'm sorry, I get really deep in thought, but the codependent thing, like when I realized how attached I was to my past and how codependent I was, that was another part of my sobriety journey, was kind of that revelation of codependency. So I was just kind of sorry about that. I was in my own head. But what I usually ask people is if it was younger you or somebody out there, like perhaps it's my friend who is just stuck right now, what would be the hope that you would give them about recovery?
I think that if you are able to recover, there will be chapters that you cannot foresee. You pave the way of possibility for things to happen that you couldn't in your wildest dreams imagine. And that is the gift of life. And you are re-engaged in life again, using your own hands, because I think there's a handless quality to the way we are when we drink. Using your own hands and your own abilities and your own agency. And so I think that there's enormous promise.
Enormous.
More
than we could even imagine.
Yeah, more than you can even imagine.
I think,
and surprises. I fell in love this year, and I didn't expect it. It had been a long time, and it is one of the great gifts of this year. And I became a grandmother 5 weeks ago. Wow. And that was a gift as well. And I think that let's take that simple one. I'm trustworthy. I'm able to be with that baby. I'm able to be a loving grandmother. And those are things you cannot be if you're drinking. Right. If you're abusing alcohol. So I think there are just possibilities that are endless. And that is something deeply engaging, and life should surprise. There are great mysteries to life, and life should surprise, and life does surprise if you show up sober.
Yes, amen.
So true.
Ann, can you tell our listeners how to get a hold of you if they are interested in doing so?
Yes, I would love to hear from your listeners. So it's very simple. My name is not simple. It is Ann Dowsett, Dowsett, and then Johnston.com. Love it. All you need to know is my website.
Johnston.com. You can find everything there. I know that did you go to school? You told me you went back to school for psychotherapy, and
I did.
I mean, it is a wealth of information on her website. I will tell you that. Really, truly. But I want to say, Ann, just while we close, that you talked about the recovery revolution, but I really hope that you know what a huge part you were in that, and championing that for other people. And writing your book and putting out the studies and putting in the work of the study and all your research and your vulnerability, that it's just, I kind of see you as like this, I don't want to use the word matriarch. Is that a bad, no. I kind of think of queen, like at the top of the, at the top of the triangle. And then I just seen the ripple effect, even just over the last years, just of what an impact you've made. So I just want to sincerely thank you for the impact you've made on not only my sobriety, but I'm sure countless others.
I agree.
Thank you so much.
Put your crown on, Ann.
Thank you.
Adjust that crown.
Yep. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ann. We are so thankful that you have given your time today to join us. And yes, we're just so thankful for all the work that you're doing. So keep up the great work.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a total treat.
Yes.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you, Ann. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining our podcast today. If you found this encouraging, please like, share, and subscribe. For more information on who we are and what we're about, please visit recoverygalspodcast.com.